Hello. Today we're going to go over how to quickly deploy a local OpenWiFi wireless LAN controller on the RGNet's rXg. After logging into your rXg, you can go to System and Backup and scroll to the bottom to the Config Templates scaffold. Now, you may have this populated with example templates if it's a fresh rXg install or if you've never messed with templates before. If you have created templates, you may not see the examples, so there's a couple of ways to get those back. The first way is that you may have a button here that says Show Examples. You can simply click that and they may pop up. If not, you can click the Create Defaults button and click OK, and that will recreate the examples for you. So if I click Show Examples here, you'll see that it is populated with all of the default example templates. The two templates we're going to be working with today are example number 6 and example number 7. So phase 1 of the install here is going to be example 6, which will simply download the image file into your virtualization host for it to be deployed with example number 7. So the first thing we do is we click Test next to example number 6, and you can see I got Result Summary Success, and I'm going to click Apply. And we're going to jump over and open another tab here into Services and Virtualization. And in this tab, I'm going to click Disk Images next to my virtualization host. And you can see at the bottom here, it's pending, where this image is currently downloading. If you tried to apply the number 6 template and it gave you a success result failure, it's possible either you've already run this template or you have a conflicting file name. So you can simply delete the file here and go back over and rerun template number 6. So while that's downloading, we're going to edit example number 7, and this will be the actual configuration of the wireless controller itself. So we'll click the Edit button next to number 7, and we'll scroll down to the configuration box here. I'm going to stick mostly with the defaults in this example, and I would say even in production, a lot of the defaults are okay. Mainly, you can give a name to the virtualization machine, and I'm going to leave it at the default of OpenWiFi. You can name this whatever you want. It doesn't change anything other than how it's displayed in the GUI. If you have a lot more access points that you're wanting to add, you might want to bump up the memory and the virtual CPUs. Here I'm using 8 gig of memory and 8 virtual CPUs and 10 gig of disk. You may want to just bump these up depending on the number of access points you are wanting to deploy. You can also change these later. You can shut down the virtual machine, change the hardware that's allocated to it, and bring the virtual machine back up. So it's not a big a deal if you want to leave it at the defaults now and then modify that later. What is a big deal is going to be the disk size. So err on the side of caution here. You can change this to whatever you want. 10 is probably okay for the controller, but you may want to bump this up to something like 40 if you are expecting a lot of access points. The next thing I want to look at is the mapped switches. So the mapped switches is going to tell the rXg which physical interfaces to map to the virtual interface inside the virtual machine. So I am only going to need one actual virtual interface, so I'm going to remove the other two here, and I'm going to change this to IX0. You can go to Network and LAN and see your physical interfaces, and then go down and look at your addresses that are assigned to the rXg to find out which is your LAN interface. So I'm going to assign this to the LAN interface for myself, which is IX0. Here you can see the IP addresses that we're going to configure for the controller. I'm going to change this to where I want my controller to be. And then I'm going to change the gateway and the name server. For now, we'll leave the host name as default, and we'll go to the SSH key pair. With Cloud Init and how we bring the virtual machine up, you can actually put in an SSH key pair in case you need to SSH into the VM later on. I happen to know the name of my SSH key pair, but I'll show you how to find it. If I go to System and Admins, you can see all the administrative accounts here. And I have 2 SSH key pairs associated with my account, and I want to use this one. So I'm just going to copy the name of that SSH key pair, and I'm going to paste it into the template like so. And then I can just click Update. Now I'm going to go back over and I'm going to make sure that the image is fully downloaded. So I'm going to click on disk images and virtualization again, and I can see now that it exists where it was pending before. So I should be good to move on to template number 7. So I'm going to click the test button. You can see that I got a result of success here, and I'm going to click apply. So when I jump back over to virtualization tab, you'll see that the OpenWiFi virtual machine has popped up and it's in the creating state. Now the creating state may take a couple of minutes or so, depending on the speed of your hardware and depending on how big you made the hard drive, while it initializes everything, including the virtual disk. So while this initializes, we're going to wait a second and we're going to wait until it turns to stopped. It'll be a little red X. And at that point, we can move on. And now that the virtual machine is showing stopped, there's one change that I want to make for my system. It's totally optional for yours. I want to enable auto start. So I can just click the enable button here, and that will make it so the virtual machine will start up in case the rXg gets rebooted, or if the virtual machine gets stopped for some reason, it will auto start it. And you can control which order these virtual machines start up by using the up and down arrows. And you can see the OpenWiFi is now moved to the top. So I'm going to go to the commands and I'm going to click start, and the virtual machine will be started now. Now this might take a minute for it to start up the first time, but you can see that it has changed from stopped to running with a green check mark. And a good way to tell whether it's probably up or not is to look at the CPU percentage. So right now it is fairly high, and this should come down to around 100% or so. But once it drops down into a lower state, then we'll move on and we'll access the controller. All right, now that the virtual machine CPU has dropped down significantly, we're going to open up a new tab, and we're going to go to openwifi.wlan.local, which is the address that we had set in the config file, in the template file. So here's the default login for OpenWiFi. We'll put the default credentials down in the description, but I'll tell you what they are right now. It is tip@usecentral.com, and the default password is OpenWiFi. I'm going to click sign in, and it's going to require me to change the password the first time. So I'm just going to give it an easy password for demonstration purposes and retype it and click change password. And that's it. We've now deployed the OpenWiFi controller locally onto a VM in the rXg. There's one more step I want to demonstrate for you, and that's actually adding an access point to the OpenWiFi controller. Now, there is a process involved that involves using TIP's certificate portal. So I'm not going to show that today. We can do that in a follow-up video. I already have an access point that is onboarded into TIP's system, and we're going to show exactly how to bring that into the controller using the rXg. To do this, we're going to go back over to the virtualization tab, and we're going to go to network and wireless. You can see I already have one wireless controller onboarded into my rXg. I'm going to click create new by the WLAN controllers. Call this one OpenWiFi. In the drop-down box, I am going to select OpenWiFi and put in the IP address that I configured in the template for Cloud-init. I'll enter the username and the password we created earlier. And here I'm going to change the timeout to about 60 seconds instead of 5 seconds. 5 seconds is a little bit low for this, just to make sure that it's successful in its synchronization. And I'm going to click create. Now the controller is going to be read and show offline while the rXg onboards it. So it's going to ping it a few times, and there's a hold down timer there. And once it makes sure that the controller is up, it's going to turn green and show online. And now it's showing online. So you may need to scroll over to the right a bit here using the scroll bar, but we're going to click the import button. And the important part about the import is going to be the access point scan box here. So we're going to enter a network insider notation of where our access points are located. Now you may have an access point management network, or you may have them just on the local LAN or even on a separate management network. Mine are on the default management network, or my single access point is. And you probably want to make this as small as possible, where if you're scanning a /16, it may take a while, but if you have a lot of access points, that may be necessary. For me, I'm just going to do a /25 here so that I can scan the lower half of this class C. And then I'm going to click import. And we'll wait while the rXg scans for new access points. And you can see that it discovered one new access point at 250.52. And we'll click close here. And while the access point is trying to connect to the controller, your wait could be up to about 5 minutes. 5 minutes would be the maximum for an access point to connect. So if you have to wait for over 5 minutes, then you can maybe go just reset the access point to a factory default state, run the import again, and it should onboard then. So we're just going to wait for a minute for this access point to onboard. And you can click the refresh button while you wait and see when it comes online. And there you see the access point has come online about 4 seconds ago. So now we have an access point connected to our OpenWiFi controller, and configurations will be downloaded from the controller. So I'm going to jump back over to the wireless tab. And once again, I'm going to click the import button. But this time I'm not going to put an access point scan in. I'm just simply going to click the import button here. And you see we have a successful result. So if I click close and I scroll down, I can see the default OpenWiFi SSID was pulled in from the controller, as well as an access point, which we can see listed here. But if we scroll on down to the access point scaffold, you can see that the access point is also now in the scaffold. And once again, there's a ping hold down timer, so it will show offline here for a few seconds until it's successfully pinged. And then this icon will turn green once we have determined that the access point is online. And this is only true if you have a local LAN access point that the rXg can communicate with. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go through config synchronization to make sure that any changes we make in the rXg will also be reflected in the OpenWiFi controller. And this is fairly simple. We just click the Sync Not Enabled button, and then we click the Generate Diff button. And that'll show us the differences between the OpenWiFi controller and the rXg configuration. And we can see those differences here, and we'll click Enable Config Synchronization. And now we have a successful synchronization. So if we close this, you can see that it's green, and you can now proceed to add or remove wireless LANs at your leisure within the rXg without having to go to the OpenWiFi controller web interface. Thank you so much for watching.